Hello, everyone. Clinky here. I have a poem for us this afternoon or the morning, whatever it is in your world right now. This one is also taken from reading poetry in the middle grades. Uh, as I've said before, don't judge a poem by its title. This one maybe some of you wouldn't have much background with because heritage, growing up here in the city and so forth. Others might have some background for it. I'll read the poem and then I'll talk a little bit more in detail about the language and some of the other facts about it afterwards. So this one is called "Abandoned Farmhouse" by Ted Kooser. Hope I'm saying that right. Kooser. Kooser. Ted Kooser. Abandoned Farmhouse. He was a big man, says the size of his shoes on a pile of broken dishes by the house. Pardon me. A tall man, too, says the length of the bed in an upstairs room. And a good, God fearing man, says the Bible with a broken back on the floor below the window, dusty with sun. But not a man for farming, says the fields, cluttered with boulders, and the leaky barn. A woman lived with him, says the bedroom wall, papered with lilacs, and the kitchen shelves covered with oilcloth, and they had a child, says the sandbox made from a tractor tire. Money was scarce, says the jars of plum preserves and canned tomatoes sealed in the cellar hole. And the winter's cold, says the rags in the window frames. It was lonely here, says the narrow country road. Excuse me. Something went wrong, says the house in the weed choked yard. Stones in the field say he was not a farmer. The still sealed jars in the cellar say he left in nervous haste. And the child? Its toys are strewn in the yard like branches after a storm. A rubber cow, a rusty tractor with a broken plow, a doll in overalls. Something went wrong, they say. Hmm. So, one of the things I liked about this poem, one of the many things I like about this poem, is that very ending. They say. So we're reading along through the poem and so forth, and that's just there's closure. We know that it's over right there, but it's also wide open because like, what do you mean they say? What happened? What happened? I want to know what happened. And it's like, if you're watching a show or you're reading another graphic novel or you're reading something and it's like, to be continued, they say. Mm. Now, on the note of language, think about that word say and says. And maybe you notice that it's being read aloud a lot in the poem. The next time I'll read it through one more time and let's just see if you can count. I know how many there are in there. Let's just see if you can count and listen to the language again of the poem and what's going on. Abandoned Farmhouse by Ted Kooser. He was a big man, says the size of his shoes, on a pile of broken dishes by the house. A tall man, too, says the length of the bed in an upstairs room. And a good, God fearing man, says the Bible with a broken back on the floor beneath the window, dusty with sun. But not a man for farming, say the fields, cluttered with boulders and the leaky barn. A woman lived with him, says the bedroom wall, papered with lilacs, and the kitchen shelves covered with oilcloth. And they had a child, says the sandbox, made from a tractor tire. Money was scarce, says the jars of plum preserves and canned tomatoes sealed in the cellar hole. And the winter's cold, say the rags in the window frames. It was lonely here, says the narrow country road. Something went wrong, says the empty house in the weed choked yard. Stones in the fields say he was not a farmer. The still sealed jars in the cellar say he left in a nervous state. And the child, its toys strewn in the yard like branches after a storm, a rubber cow, a rusty tractor with broken plow, a doll in overalls. Something went wrong, they say. So, how many did you come up with? I was doing a little tally on my hands at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. I got 13. Hopefully you did too. Okay. Now, some of the other things about this, um, in that first stanza, one thing that, for me, maybe there's other things for you, but one of the things that stands out for me is like, which are they talking about here? Dusty with sun. Does that mean the Bible's dusty with sun or the window's dusty with sun? Okay. He was a big man, says the size of his shoes, on a pile of broken dishes by the house. A tall man, too, says the length of the bed in an upstairs room. And a good God fearing man, says the Bible with a broken back on the floor beneath the window, dusty with sun. But not a man for farming, say the fields cluttered with boulders and the leaky barn. Okay, so that the Bible with a broken back on the floor beneath the window, comma, dusty with sun. So what do you think? Does that mean the Bible is dusty with sun or the window? I think it's the window because the last thing that they spoke about before going into comma is the window. Okay, so therefore, window, comma, dusty with sun, that means that the dust would be modifying the window and not the Bible. That's my take on that. Now, also it's language specific here, and I mean, this happens to be Bible in here. It could be the Quran, it could be a statue of Buddha, it could be anything. But in this particular poem, just for lack of judgment, whatever, it happens to be Bible. Okay. So anyway, back to what I said. He was a God-fearing man. Says the Bible with a broken back on the floor below the window. So what do you mean when broken back? Who's a broken back? Well, that's a book. So when we open a book and the spine becomes a little bit tattered and broken, not from just cranking it open, like which would happen if you took a book and don't do it. Took a book and held onto the pages tightly and just pull it backwards, you'll literally kind of break the spine of the book, the backbone of the book. But if you read a book over and over and over and over and over again, the spine becomes tattered. So that's what they're suggesting here, that he reads that over and over and over again. Okay? A woman, a lot of evidence-based stuff in this poem. We don't know. We're just making observations. We're like peeking through a window or just coming upon this scene and looking at all this stuff and wondering, a little investigation here. What's happened? So the how we know the woman lived with him. Okay, a woman lived with him, says the bedroom wall, papered with lilacs, and the kitchen shelves covered with oilcloth. Okay, pause there. Now maybe it's a little bit judgmental or whatever, saying that what's wrong with lilacs? I'm a man. I like lilacs. I like flowers and so forth. Nothing about that here, right? We're just simply stating it's an older poem that because based on I don't know, maybe some of the other things they say about his shoes and stuff, that he might not be a lilac loving kind of guy. So that's therefore the wife. But then there's other evidence too. The kitchen shelves covered with oilcloth. Oilcloth is for rubbing onto I don't know, like leather goods and stuff, and bringing stains and stuff through, and oiling shelves and so forth. The later on in the poem, maybe the stuff about money was scarce, says the jars of plum preserves and canned tomatoes sealed in the cellar hole. I mean, I do a lot of the cooking at home, very much of it. My wife has just started, so maybe I would do that. But they're just suggesting here that she keeping the house and stuff, that there's a woman here. Plus the fact, now we look at that they have a child. Okay. There's the sandbox. The fact that they know that they have a child because there's a sandbox made from a tractor tire. So big old tractor tire, right? Big round tire, not a heart, and it's sitting on the ground, and they put sand in it so that the child can play in it. I had a sandbox growing up, my brother and I. It was fabulous, except when the kitty cats came in there and did their little sonata thing. But anyway, sandbox. I spent hours and hours and hours and hours and hours playing in our sandbox. That was before the internet. Yeah. Back to the poem. The winter's cold, says the rags in the window frames. It was lonely here, says the narrow country road. I don't know. I had again, back to the background of the poem. Many of you, maybe you've never been around a farmhouse. Maybe some have. I don't know. No judgment again. I was lucky when I was a kid, junior high and stuff. Spent my whole summers out on the farm at my cousin's place. I had a cousin same age, a couple of cousins older, whatever. And yeah, we spent all of our time out there. Long road winding into there. Sometimes we would take drives. I wasn't old enough to drive actually, but I got to drive through the fences and stuff. But we take a drive and just go explore sometimes with like an older older cousin, and we'd come across like abandoned places and stuff, and you could kind of have that mystery going on. So, um, continuing on to the very last bit of the poem, something went wrong, they say. So, as many times as we read this poem, and as carefully as we read this poem, we will never know what went wrong. Maybe nothing went wrong, but something did because they just left stuff in the kitchen and everything. They just left. So again, here we are, kind of a COVID poem because we don't know what's going on out there. There's so many questions, so many unanswered thoughts and stuff during COVID times here. What went wrong on this farmhouse? This is an older poem. This is not, nothing to do with COVID, nothing to do with any kind of SARS or anything like that. Something just went wrong. I think I'll sign off there. I've done a lot of talking on this one. Hopefully you enjoyed this poem, Mr. Clinky on the Abandoned Farmhouse by Ted Kooser. Ciao for now.